What's going on, everybody? Before today's video begins, I just wanted to drop a very special announcement / do a bit of promoting. So recently I found out that I was accepted by the Overwatch League into their co-streaming program this year, which means that tomorrow on opening day, I'll be able to stream here live on YouTube while the games are going on. I'm going to have the rights to do that. So if you're interested in watching the games with me live while they're happening, feel free to drop by. We're going to have a good time. We're going to talk memes. I'll provide insights when I can and whatnot. Maybe we'll have some special guests on too. It's going to be a great time, and I hope to see a lot of you there starting at 3 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. Anyway, that's all I've got for you. If you're interested, feel free to drop by. I'll be streaming all 3 games, but now let's get on to the video. Welcome to week 1 of the annual Overwatch League Season 5 predictions. It's become a staple here on the channel, and I'm very happy to bring it back yet again, this time being on Overwatch 2. There's going to be more guesswork on here, so it should be a fun time this year because there's a bigger chance that things go horribly wrong. Before diving into the video, allow for me to explain how these types of videos work. So basically, we're going to give a preview of every game that goes on every single week. In these overviews, I'll discuss key factors of the game, interesting storylines, who should be favored, and my prediction on who wins accompanied by a final score. Another thing I like to do is predict what the meta could be. This year it'll happen with less frequency, but I'll still be sure to bring it up anytime there is some sort of balance patch going on. I would make preds here in the first week, but I kind of get the feeling things are going to be very random, so for now I'm going to hold off. Something else I like doing is giving you an idea of what games I'm keeping a close eye on for the week. If a game falls under this category, I'll be sure to let it known. And I'm adding some new features into it this year, community predictions. Each week I'm going to put up a poll asking for your opinion on who wins certain games, and the results will be put for you to see on the screen. It's a fun way to get you guys more involved, and I'm sure that over time we can find different means to make it even more interesting. Polls are going to be taking place on the community tab if you're interested in participating, so be sure to look out for those. That's essentially the gist of the series though. Are you ready for a new era of pro Overwatch? Yeah, me too. Let's get into the matches. To start off the new year, the LA Gladiators are going to take on the NYXL, and mark this one down as a key match, ladies and gentlemen. New York are starting a brand new chapter, and they'll be playing against a team that many consider to be one of the favorites to win it all. There's a lot that both sides are trying to prove. I'm more so going to go off who I have more confidence in currently, and if that's the case, I think you gotta favor the Gladiators. They're more well-rounded, and if it comes to composition changes and substitutions and whatnot, they're going to have the upper hand. And with teams supposedly not having like a set philosophy on what to run still, I'd say the Glads definitely have a good advantage there. Also, if I'm being honest with you, New York in my opinion falls behind everywhere, maybe except for DPS. Yaki and Flora could definitely keep pace with Kevster and the boys, but they might be a little outmatched in some of the other places, which is the big problem. So I'm gonna say that the Glads go out and win the set 3-1, and they start their year off on the right foot. I'm pretty pumped to watch this new NYXL roster in action, but this opponent seems like it might be a bit out of their league, at least for the time being. Getting us halfway through opening day will be the Paris Eternal versus San Francisco Shock matchup. I wouldn't go as far as saying this is a key match, since I do believe the Shock just kind of feel better on paper, but I'm willing to bet that a lot of us are still pretty excited. A new era has begun for this team. We're all watching with anticipation to see if Proper and the rest of his fellow rookies can live up to the hype. Their opening day opponent might be the perfect way to build up some early confidence and prove themselves against a decent team. No disrespect to Paris here, but I think we can all agree that the Shock feel a lot more exciting. I just have this gut feeling that Proper in particular is going to show up big time in his debut. And I truthfully don't know if Paris have an answer for him, and maybe even somebody like Finn. Due to higher energy out of the gates and maybe a bit more star power, I'm going with a 3-1 Shock victory. Keep an eye on Glister in this one, by the way. Don't be surprised if he balls out against his former team and puts Kilo in his place. If Paris does make this a series, it could largely be because of his efforts. To conclude opening day, you've got the Florida Mayhem versus the Atlanta Reign. While you generally have to feel better about Atlanta, the anticipation for the Mayhem continues to grow and grow. Some people believe that they could end up being some sort of dark horse competitor this year. You can't really ask for a better test to see where they currently stand, because while Atlanta aren't as good as last year in theory, they're still a respectable group. I definitely favor Atlanta here though, for the simple fact that their synergy is probably stronger here at the start of the season, because this Reign team, they've kind of been established for a long time. They built their team early in the year, unlike Florida. And I mean, particularly with the Mayhem, they've made quite a few changes recently, which could make their teamwork a little sloppy in some regards against those top-level opponents. They've got a lot of potential stars, but they may not know how to get the most out of them until they get some more practice time together. But still, you gotta recognize that the Mayhem have potential. DPS looks relatively strong, and Tank has promise to it as well. No matter the final score, this game could feel pretty close on a map-to-map basis, but I genuinely do feel that the Atlanta Reign have the tools needed to counter their opponents. Just go down the list, why don't ya? Xe and Hydron, they're a pretty scary duo, but Atlanta have Kai to counter them. Someone, at Tank, he could be pretty decent, but Atlanta in return have 2 veteran tanks. Also, you gotta prefer the Reign's backline, seeing as Kariv and Animo are kind of out of their primes. Give me the Reign in a hard-fought sweep. Again, the map score definitely will not indicate how close this series truly could be. Florida make them earn this, in my opinion. The Mayhem are going to come out swinging with a lot of energy. That's just the general feeling I've had recently. Someone like Xe, he might come out of the gates going absolutely insane since he's so excited to be back after having to take a year off. This could quickly turn into something very close for comfort if Atlanta don't weather the storm. I expect them to be able to handle it since I kind of prefer their team, but you definitely can't rule out the possibility. That gets you through opening day. Starting off on Friday now, you've got the Shock versus the Spitfire. It's cool and exciting to witness 2 relatively new rosters play each other on a new game, but let's be honest with ourselves, there's a good chance this one ends in a blowout. London are multiple tiers behind the Shock. In my opinion, they have to rely on the chaotic nature of a new game to come anywhere close to victory, and if that's the thing you ultimately depend on to have a competitive set, it's hard to like your chances. On the other side of the coin, the Shock simply have more confidence, consistency, and better team play. The aspect of this matchup that especially terrifies me is what could transpire in the DPS duel. The Shock feel miles ahead of London in this regard. I don't see the Spitfire having much of an answer for Proper or anybody else on that line. Give me the Shock in a quick and easy 3-0. Containing the San Francisco DPS might be the biggest key factor for London to make this a series, which in a sense means that London's biggest win condition is also their greatest roadblock. Expect the Spitfire to struggle big time. On to match 2, where we have the Vancouver Titans pitted up against the Boston Uprising. Neither team is regarded in a very high light currently, so maybe this could be a decent one. This isn't the worst matchup in the world for a Titans team that people are expecting to be trash. Reports state that both teams haven't done amazing in the current meta, which gives an underdog-like Vancouver team the chance to make some noise. Also, I just have a lot of faith in Fultz to do relatively well against the plethora of tanks on the side of Boston. And if that wasn't enough, the overall strength of their DPS line isn't too far off. The only problem is, Boston clearly have the best player in the lobby by a long shot in Striker. If that man gets it going, forget about it. It's difficult to envision the Vancouver damage dealers keeping up. Also, Boston's support line is clearly more favorable at a glance. I'm gonna go with a Boston victory in 4 maps. I'd love nothing more than to see a Vancouver upset here on opening day, but I don't think the Titans have the firepower or consistency to topple a more disciplined and star-studded Boston roster. So now we can get into key match number 2 here in week 1. Get ready for a good one, folks. The Battle of Texas Part 1 is right around the corner. Skill-wise, this matchup is as stacked as they come. Piggy versus Hanbin, Sparkle versus Pelican, Iris and Lastro versus Fielder. There's a strong possibility this ends up being a bloodbath. At a glance, you likely favor the Dallas Fuel. They definitely have the stronger overall team, and they are supposedly doing stronger in scrims. However, the Outlaws are not to be underestimated, as they themselves have been relatively decent, and with an X Factor like Pelican on their team now, anything is possible. Something else to keep in mind as we analyze this matchup is that it's an in-person event. The adrenaline and cheering crowd could lead to some additional energy and pressure on both sides. With emotions running high, you might witness some critical errors and/or huge pop-offs. While I definitely think the Fuel are the better team, the crowd makes me believe that Houston gathered the energy needed to punch above their weight class. But even so, I still will be picking the Dallas Fuel to win the set. The advantage ultimately comes to Dallas for a few reasons. The big thing I personally am leaning towards with the Dallas Fuel is them generally feeling more in their element. Their support line is generally going to look more comfortable out there, and any sort of Lucio meta, I mean, you'd have to imagine it goes their way. Chio is definitely going to make more meaningful plays compared to Iris or Lastro. I kind of have this feeling as well that Hanbin and maybe even Fearless are just going to look better out of the gates than Piggy. Supposedly, Hanbin in particular has been playing at an MVP level in the early stages of this year, and the idea of Sparkle maybe playing some Genji as well gives me a lot of hope that Dallas take care of business in a close set. That's all I've got for you in the Battle of Texas, so let's talk about Toronto versus Washington on Saturday afternoon. This one is hard to get a grasp on. It almost feels like Washington have the stronger overall team, and yet the scrim results make it clear that Toronto are supposedly performing at a higher level. Do we believe in the powers of Decay and Assassin and Mag and whatnot, or is it more worth it to invest in the scrim bucks early on? Matchup-wise, the Justice have the players with the higher potential, especially at DPS. Decay, Assassin, and Happy is just way more explosive and versatile, arguably. The thing is, Toronto have such a clear-cut, critical advantage that is arguably greater than anything Washington has over them. The support situation is practically a day and night difference. Arguably one of the weakest support lines in North America currently is taking on one of the best. There's a possibility that Twilight and Charong blow the Justice out of the water. I don't care what the consensus on supports are. When you have a duo who take home such a clear-cut advantage, they're going to have an enormous impact on the outcome of the game if they're hard diffing their opponents. And when you add on the fact that, again, Toronto are supposedly playing at a pretty high level in the current meta, it's hard to not favor them. Give me Toronto in a closely contested back and forth. It's not an easy choice to make, but Toronto are on the rise and Washington appears to be stagnant. Let's move on to our next game, shall we? Atlanta versus New York. If this was a few months ago, I'd say this could be a really close game. But it's a different story here in the present, because Atlanta are thriving supposedly, while the NYXL are in a very weird situation. The tanks don't feel amazing, nor does their weaker flexibility at support. It doesn't help that New York synergy is also divided apparently. It can be argued that the NYXL's potential is definitely higher than Atlanta, but in their current state, the Reign are clearly in the better place. OG and Ultraviolet are so much more versatile, and I'm convinced that somebody like Hawk is going to provide more stability than Vulcan or Kellen in the early season. The NYXL just have so much going against them. It's honestly insane to me, like you just can't count on the DPS to win this game on their own, especially when you consider that Atlanta have some pretty deadly damage dealers of their own. You need a well-rounded performance, and in their rumored state, it's just hard to see that happening. I like the Reign in a quick 4-mapper. They're simply in better shape. End of discussion. Greater synergy, greater flexibility, and more consistency. And finishing up Saturday will be the Glads in Boston. Generally, there's not a lot to look forward to. We're talking two completely different tiers of competitors. One's looking to win a title, and the other would be lucky to just make the playoffs. The outcome seems rather obvious if you ask me. I'm viewing this game as a way of gauging Boston's capabilities. If they can at least make some of the maps close, or maybe even take one, that would be a huge W. I'm definitely not getting my hopes up though, because the LA tanks and supports just offer you so much more. If there's one thing I'm looking forward to at the very least though, it would be the DPS battle. Striker versus Kevster and or An sounds incredibly hype. Striker versus Kevster is fun due to them both being prolific tracers, and with Ans versus Striker, it's a battle of former teammates. These two literally won a championship together just 2 years ago. Seeing two friends become rivals should be a ton of fun. Overall, these 1v1s provide a lot of excitement to an otherwise boring matchup on paper. But that's about the only place Boston stands a chance to me, so give me LA in a decisive 3-0. The Glad should take this one with relative ease. With that match out of the way, we're on to the final day, and we're starting off with a somewhat interesting matchup in London versus Vancouver, which I'm viewing as the new Bread Bowl matchup, at least here at the start of the year. Two teams not initially liked are going head-to-head to decide who is arguably the worst team in North America. In terms of who I favor, I gotta go with Vancouver by a tiny margin. I have them one spot higher in my power rankings, so why not let it fly? This is a 50-50 match, so there's a great chance that I miscalculate here. Tank, DPS, support, they're all incredibly even on the surface. And all of that just gives me even more of an incentive to believe that this is going to be some sort of 5-map extravaganza. The Titans having a Lucio expert like Masa could prove to be the difference maker in this one. But also in general, I view the Titans' playmaking potential in a slightly, I mean ever so slightly higher light. The Vancouver supports and DPS just excite me more. The London DPS arguably have higher potential, but I prefer the hot hand in this situation, as Shockwave and Aspire have the more recent performances that impress you, and when you combine them with Masa, there's reason to believe that they're gonna get the job done. It's breadsticks time, baby. On the topic of baguettes, the Paris Eternal and the Florida Mayhem make up game number 2 on Sunday. Not gonna lie, I'm pretty hyped about this one. A Florida team on the rise are taking on somebody who are arguably around their level. What a great test for both sides. Are Florida better than we think? Or are Paris clearly one of the better mid-tier rosters? Here are my takeaways. The two of them are about even on DPS, with support looking a bit more favorable for Paris, and tank maybe going the way of Florida. It's a really close matchup. From a skill perspective, nobody comes out ahead for sure. And as a result, I believe that coaching is going to be the main X factor in deciding a winner. And as of right now, the coaching staff that I trust more to help get their team the W would be the Paris Eternal, which means that I'm picking the Eternal to win in a close 5-map thriller. J-Mac is such a fantastic coach. I have all the trust in the world for him. And while I appreciate Goomba, I just feel that J-Mac is a more experienced and proven head coach. J-Mac is apparently really good at his job, so if this game's outcome rides on who makes the bigger mistake first, my money is on Paris to walk away with the win. Anyway, the next game taking place is between Dallas and Washington. And you know, I'm honestly not that excited for this one. There's a possibility that the Fuel prepared for their matchup with Houston a lot more, which could in play lead to a justice advantage, I guess you could say, but I don't believe that Dallas need to prep all that much for the specific opponent. Washington are a decent team, but when I seriously compare the two sides, I don't know if there's a single thing that Washington does better. Could Decay maybe end up being the best player in the lobby? Sure. Outside of that though, Dallas are kinda superior. Stronger tanks, better coaching, and a huge diff at support makes me think that the Fuel take this one rather easily. Chio, Fielder, Hanbin, and/or Fearless just crush this one to me. Dallas have this. I'll give the Washington justice the lack of preparation / pity map, but that's about it. And finally, to finish off your opening week, the Houston Outlaws play the Toronto Defiant, and I'm penciling this one in as the final key match of the week. Supposedly, these two are both borderline top 5 teams in North America. This is a perfect matchup to help gauge where the two currently stand. For this one, I went with my gut by picking the team that I had higher in my power rankings. Houston generally have the more exciting team. Toronto have a nice advantage at support going for themselves, but the gap isn't ridiculously large like it is for Washington. It's nothing Houston can't overcome if the rest of their team can play up to par, and I firmly believe that they have it in them to do so. For starters, I prefer the Houston DPS line. Toronto just don't have an answer for Pelican in particular, who honestly might be the best player in the whole lobby, and we all know damn well how oppressing he can be to deal with when he's not in check. And that's exactly what I think ends up happening in this matchup. Additionally, and while this is kind of more on the gut feeling side of things, it is a prediction after all, I believe that Houston are going to come out swinging. They're going to be looking to take out their anger on someone after a heartbreaking loss to the Dallas Fuel yet again. With an exciting new roster and playing a game at home and all, it seems like Houston are going to find a way to win at least one matchup this week. It won't be easy, seeing as they've got some very tough opponents this week, but I believe in them to get it done. Will I regret putting all this trust in the Houston Outlaws? Perhaps, but you know what? Screw it. I'm going with my gut. Toronto have it in them to win this game just as much, but I say Houston have the better overall team, which is why they are ultimately more trustworthy. I appreciate Twilight and Hisu and whatnot, but Houston just have the bigger stars to me, especially at that DPS line, which is why they end up winning the game. On that concluding note, though, that gets us through my Week 1 predictions. My confidence and overall expectations are the lowest they have ever been. I have zero clue what to expect, which gets me super pumped. It's game time, ladies and gentlemen. It's a new year and a new game. Anything is possible, and I couldn't be more excited to be a part of the journey alongside all of you wonderful people. Until then, guys, I hope you enjoyed my preview of the week ahead. If you did, consider hitting the like button, leaving a comment, and subscribing to my channel if you're new. And as always, thank you all so much for supporting my content. I appreciate you all so much, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.